Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final session now. I'll keep it short. I just want to share a few learnings from today, wrap it up, and also talk a bit about the final logistics, just to iterate, especially for those who haven't been here for the last sessions. Everything will be recorded, and we'll share all the recordings afterwards by email. If you have any questions, also any questions on any of the sessions that we had today, also feel free to reach out to me personally. My email it's very easy. It's hannah@localize.com. You only have to make sure that you have Hannah without an H in the end, because we have another Hannah in the team as well. And otherwise, for the logistics side as well, we'll share an email afterwards, where we also have a special offer that we prepared. And as I also mentioned, if there's any specific cases, the offer also includes a pre-check, and I would love to hear from anyone who's interested. But now the important part, what have we learned today, and what happened actually? My day included 3 sessions, so I'll focus on them. Um, in the morning, we started speaking about what actually changed in global mobility over the last years. What are we looking back at? And that's also what we've wrapped up with in our last panel. And then we started looking ahead. And that for me is the most interesting part. A lot has happened, and a lot of change was accelerated. So if we look at where we were 20 years ago, it's very different to where we are at right now. And a lot of the change happened specifically in the last 3 years. So for a long time, and Sherry said that in our last panel session, that for a very long time, it was all about long-term assignments of very senior managers. Also very expensive relocations. And that was probably the case up until at least 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. And then a lot has changed slowly already before, with more and more young people relocating. But then the big shift really happened since COVID started, because people actually realized that borders are more fluid, that they can actually work abroad. And I think we also acknowledged that it was a bit of a wild west. So it was not always an ideal situation if you look at it from a compliance perspective, but it really opened the world. And there are statistics now showing that 80% of millennials want to spend part of their career abroad. So there is a pressure from a talent perspective to move across borders. Companies need to enable that. And that is something that's very interesting. There's also the part of how can we actually make that easier. And so the session that I had over lunchtime, which was on changing the European immigration game, together with people from the political perspective as well, on everything that's going on there, because we do need international talent. And I think the push that's there from a government's perspective is also benefiting talent to move more freely across borders, because on one hand, yes, we're talking about bringing talent into Europe, for example, into the US, but we're also talking about bringing talent across different countries. People are not moving only once to one location, but they actually move more, and borders become more fluid, at least in the perception of people. And I think that is something um, that's very important as well. And one of the main outcomes also of today, of our session on the governmental perspective, is that we need to make more noise for immigration. There is no rational, logical explanation of why people are blocking, especially highly skilled talent coming in. But yet, a lot of governments are still putting up blockers. And the more we talk about the benefits, the more apparent we make it, the more change we can create there. And I think also the private sector and companies stepping in and really requesting that borders are opened is something very important, and that can accelerate change. Um, On the last panel, we talked about the way forward and also what's in there for companies. And I think now it is a challenging time overall because of the economic crisis, less budgets being there. It is also more difficult for companies to really invest. And global mobility is often investment. If you have a person that is at your office, that doesn't move, it's typically the cheapest option, because even if, for example, also for some working remotely or moving somewhere, you might save something on the office cost. There's a lot of other costs involved, as I think we all know. And so that investment right now is more challenging, but still there's a big push from a talent side. And so right now it's really about finding that middle ground. One thing that was very apparent in the discussions this year is that compliance is a topic that's not going away and that we have to deal with. And so while 2020 and 2021 was more of a Wild West where people just moved, now companies and employers have realized that it has to work in a regulated way. There have to be rules and it has to be tracked. And so now it is really about setting up long-term policies. What do we want to enable and what not? And that will be the big challenge now going forward. Because there's a big benefit in continuing to invest in global mobility. One aspect that Sherry, for example, mentioned is also, and why actually a lot of mobility programs were designed before, is the learning aspect. You send an employee abroad to experience a different part of the company, to experience a different culture. And right now, more and more assignments are based on individual employees' needs, which is also good. But at the same time, now trying to see how do we actually design global mobility programs for the future? How do they also differ depending on the company's needs, depending on the company's stage in terms of where do we actually have hubs, for example, but also depending on where the employee is. So you will probably see a difference in terms of, is that someone with a family where the move is still more complicated? We really have to invest as well in school search, etc. Or is it someone who wants to temporarily move, also not bring the household, for example, who might also only want to move for a shorter period of time, where it's also significantly less cost. And so all of that, how do we take the learnings from the last years and everything that they've enabled, which is more flexibility, into a period now where budgets are more constrained? And flexibility was really the one keyword that everyone was mentioning, because flexibility is important and it matters to employees. And so this is what we have to keep. And I think no company will get around it just because we've learned that it's possible. It's very hard to now say we have to go back to the office every day for the same amount of time. And flexibility in what regard soever is important. And in my belief, this will also count for mobility across borders, because it is very hard to tell someone, if we take Europe as an example, if you can do your job from maybe the job that you have in the UK, in Germany, why can't you do it in Spain for some period of time? And I do think employees understand that there is the compliance aspect, but at the same time, there is an aspect of the risk also depends on who is moving. Does the company have a location or an entity there? And also, what's the time frame? And so the explanations that have to be given are more extensive, and it's going to get very hard to simply say no. And I think there we also shouldn't let budget constraints result in just saying no. I think now the middle ground is important, and I also think from all discussions we understood that it is a very tough time from a company perspective. I also feel that I know that it's not the easiest time, but I think a constant and maybe also joint fight for flexibility, and for immigration and for enabling people to explore the world and move across borders is needed, and will bring the world a step further. And so, closing up with a positive outlook, it was a challenging time. I think everyone who worked in global mobility over the last years didn't have an easy time because first you had to enable a whole organization to work remotely. Then you also had to deal with trying to track where employees are at. And now you need to define the global mobility programs of the future. So definitely not easy. So also big kudos to everyone there. A big thanks again to all our panelists, to the team as well who made this possible. It was a great day. We'll definitely do this again. And just to iterate, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that come up also later on. And that's it for today. We're wrapping it up, and I hope you all have a great rest of the evening, great rest of the day, depending on where you're at. And I really hope to see you for our next event again. Thank you.